half 100 on them at Owen Field, or the run rules on the diamond at Love's Field. We're giving you the breakdowns, the bets, and the hot takes from the perspective of two former OU Athletics employees. You're listening to the Mainline Podcast with Tyler Burton and Adam Jaquez.
Let's go! Let's go! Go!
Let's go. Welcome to the Mainline. I'm Adam Jaquez. He's Tyler Burton. My voice is recovering a little bit from some sickness. I'm sure it will crack at some point this evening as we record, talking through some of the very stressful, very unfortunate, very sad situations that Oklahoma football finds itself in right now. Tyler, welcome in. How are you feeling tonight?
Adam has a crying baby in the background. I think that's a perfect representation from a huge portion of the fan base. That ties in directly. Adam, thank you for getting your son to cry. I think that ties in directly with where we're at here on November 13th. But Adam, thankfully we do this podcast a couple of days after game, so that gives us some time to kind of process what happened, kind of calm down instead of throwing crazy hot takes out there right after the game because we're angry or we're pissed off. Let the cooler heads prevail. Because Saturday night after Oklahoma walked off the field and Columbia losing to Missouri the way that they did, losing to one of the worst quarterbacks that I've ever seen at the Division I level in Drew Pine, I was ready not just to fire Brent Venables. I was ready to say, fire everybody. Let's just blow the whole damn thing up right now. Let's just start over. But here we are. We fast forward to 3 days later. No doubt about it, this is one of the worst football teams that I have seen in my lifetime. I can say that this is by far and away, since I've been alive in 1994. I don't really remember the John Blake era, but in the last 25 plus years that I can remember, watching football every single Saturday with my dad, I can realistically sit here and say that I can never remember watching Oklahoma team that is this bad. So this is where we're at in 2024, and here we are 3 days removed from the loss. I've calmed down a little bit, still pissed off, but we've kind of calmed down a little bit, but I've kind of backed away from the 100% Brent's got to go and kind of dialed that back a little bit.
Tyler, your audio is a little bit gargly, which of course is perfect because it was great before we hit record. So we'll check on that, make sure that doesn't continue. But yeah, it is good that we are recording a few days later because I was very much like, and I think there's still part of me that I have one foot in one camp and one foot in the other camp of like, Brent's got to go. Brent needs to stay, or not needs to stay, but can stay, I guess, so to speak. I guess we can get into the Brent stuff if you want to, but is there anything that you really want to like call out from the Missouri game? Because I think it played out almost exactly like I thought it would. Drew Pine came out there, and we talked about this a week ago. Those coaches from Missouri had him in a much better position to succeed than he did against Alabama. We called that out. Everyone kind of expected him to just be an absolutely awful quarterback, and he was, but he was limited in what the coaches allowed him to do, and they put him in a position to succeed and win, something that we haven't seen our coaches do for our quarterbacks nearly all year. Definitely not all year. So good coaching from Missouri. They put him in a position to have a chance to win, and he didn't make mistakes at all, really. So whereas Jackson Arnold was the complete opposite, took a step forward against Ole Miss, a step forward against Maine, and took 10 steps back against Missouri just for no real reason at all. But anything else I guess we need to cover at that before we start really digging into like the future of Brent Venables and what Oklahoma needs to do there?
Did the audio sound any better after?
It's still crackly. It's still crackly. You might want to jump out of the studio and jump back in. And while you're doing that, I'll kind of cover like in terms of like Jackson Arnold, and there's definitely a situation going with the quarterback. And, some people are saying we need to go back to Hawkins. Well, Hawkins had probably the worst 8-play stretch of any quarterback all season. Jackson Arnold kind of looked a little bit more functional. At least you could run an offense through him, even if it wasn't great. But I think kind of the way things look, just in terms of the quarterback situation, it's like, you could move to Hawkins. It'd be terrible. You could move to Casey Thompson. It'd still be terrible. It really doesn't matter who plays at this point. I mean, nobody's going to win you a game. I mean, we're playing Alabama. We're playing LSU. The quarterback situation is what it is. I think you kind of just say, hey, whether it be Arnold or Hawkins, like we'll do right by you. We'll try to put some good tape out there for you so you can have some portal suitors, but it really doesn't matter who you go with on the portal. I know I'm skipping around a little bit on our itinerary there. Tyler, let's check your audio here.
Yeah, hopefully the audio is fixed a little bit. We'll see.
Yeah,
okay, things are good now. Yeah. I think you make a really good point regarding the quarterbacks. I mean, obviously we're in a position right now where, sitting here at 5-5, our most realistic chance of, getting a 6 win to make it to a bowl game was this past weekend up in Columbia. Now you've got one of the best teams in college football, maybe the best and hottest team in college football right now, coming to Norman in 2 weeks' time in Kalen DeBoer in Alabama. So that's not going to be a win whatsoever. And then you've got to go on the road the following weekend to Baton Rouge to take on a reeling LSU team that maybe they feel like they have nothing to play for. Maybe it's an opportunity where, it is going to be senior day down there at Death Valley. They're going to be hyped up, ready to go. So we can pretty much say, barring some miracle or Alabama or LSU pulls an Auburn and just simply hands Oklahoma a game, we'll see if Oklahoma decides that they actually want to win a football game and actually take it from the opponent. I'm not sure. But, I mean, the last couple of things that I'll say regarding the Missouri game, and then we'll obviously talk about, Brent Venables and offensive coordinator. I think that the thing that was the most, concerning thing for me when you look at the Missouri game, first I want to start off and say that I thought that the defense played very, very well for about 90% of the football game. We knew going into this matchup that Brady Cook wasn't going to be able to play. Drew Pine, one of the worst quarterbacks that we've seen in recent memory in college football. We thought that this was going to be an opportunity for Oklahoma really to, kind of force Missouri to be one-dimensional, stop the run, load the box, and Oklahoma did that very, very well for the better part of 3 quarters. But then again, it's kind of like the theme of this entire season. Oklahoma wasn't able to do anything consistently on the offensive side of the football, so it constantly forced Oklahoma's defense into some pretty bad positions, and eventually the dam just broke. And Adam, if you would have told me prior to the game that Drew Pine was going to throw 3 touchdown passes and be by far and away the best quarterback in this matchup, I would have thought that you were probably high on something, because I realistically didn't think that was something that could actually happen. But yeah, you look at it, obviously the 6 fumbles, losing 4 of them. Jackson Arnold shouldn't have thrown a pick 6. He had 2 fumbles. Peyton Bowen still can't catch. He's still not consistent in catching a punt. Deion Burks, I'm really not even worried about that. It was nice to see him back out there. Hopefully he's doing okay after taking that vicious shot to the head. But it's just kind of what we've come to expect from Oklahoma this season. This is a bad football team. Make no mistake about it. The defense has done enough consistently all year long to try and help the offense. Like, if we could just get any type of production from the offense, we're probably sitting here at 7 or 8 wins. But that's just been kind of the theme for 2024. But we don't have I've got confidence in the defense going forward. 2 people that appear to have more confidence in Brent Venables than a big portion of the fan base is OU Athletic Director Joe Castiglione and University President Joe Harris, who we heard from at the Board of Regents meeting yesterday. Adam, you've got the comments from President Harris here.
Yep.
Been a tough season. I've been around Oklahoma football for a long time. We have the right coach. This is our coach. We knew it was going to be a tough year going to the SEC. The first year, you add that with all of the things that are taking place around the shifting NIL landscape, with hopefully more certainty coming next year. If the preliminary approval becomes final in the lawsuit, we knew there was going to be some turbulence. Obviously, we'd love to have had more wins, but our confidence in the coach, it's as steady as it's ever been.
Joe Harris with a statement there. Obviously, there was a Board of Regents meeting. People were going to ask him about that. It was a prepared statement, of course. Joe Castiglione has a statement himself as well. I think a lot of people read too much into that and go, oh, great, like we're stuck with Brent for another year. And maybe that's the case. Maybe that's the decision that they've already made. Maybe the big money donors and the board has already determined that. To me, though, I don't think that they could have said anything else. If they've already determined that, hey, they're going to get rid of Venables, they had to still say that message. If they were still uncertain, they had to say that message. You can't go out and say something that is kind of wishy-washy or, hey, we'll wait and see what happens over these next 2 games. You can't deliver that message at all because of the situation with players entering the transfer portal, with players potentially quitting on the team, with recruits bailing and decommitting, all sorts of different fallout. So you can't come, with any other statement than what he just gave right there. So in my mind, I think it's kind of meaningless because, you can still change your mind. You can still fire him. You can still do all sorts of things. I think the statement almost means nothing.
It was a pro message, obviously, that Joe Castiglione followed that up with, but I don't think that it was nearly quite as supportive as what we heard from President Harris. Joe C. making the comment, we're mindful that we haven't met the Oklahoma standard for 2024. That being said, we truly believe in Coach Venables and our team and are completely focused on supporting them and looking at all the ways to address the needed improvements now as well as in preparation for next year. So they've given their continued endorsement of Brent Venables and a vote of confidence that Brent was and still is the guy, despite the 5-5 record and all the injuries that the Sooners have had to deal with this year. They believe he has this program going in the right direction. But Adam, I mean, you make a really good point. Did we really expect anything else? I mean, what are they supposed to say at this point in time where you still have 2 more games remaining in the regular season? I mean, there's a lot of different factors that you've got to consider here. I mean, obviously, we're talking about the $44.8 million buyout. That's probably the biggest thing that is saving Brent Venables at this point right now from that he really getting turned up on that seat that he's on right now. But I mean, what are they supposed to say? I think that you kind of hit the nail on the head there.
Yeah, I think Eric Bailey had a follow-up question to Joe Castiglione that was actually really important, because once you get past the prepared statement of sorts, you start to get into where their minds really are. And Eric Bailey, Tulsa World, he asked, can you say right now that Coach Venables will be back in 2025? Joe Castiglione's response, and I quote, "As I just said, we're focusing on all areas of improvement that are necessary now and for next year," end quote. That is, I mean, pretty wide open as far as the door there of possibilities.
Here's what I'll say. Do I expect Brent Venables to be back at Oklahoma next year? Yes. Barring some situation where Alabama comes in here and, beats Oklahoma 38-7. 7 points, that's a little bit lenient. I don't think Oklahoma's going to score on Alabama. But barring some instance where LSU and Alabama just simply blow us out of the water, and it's apparent that the team has kind of quit on this season, that they've kind of given up on Coach Venables, they've given up on this season, then I think that you could possibly be looking at a situation where some of these big money donors they're having these conversations, and there are conversations being had behind the scenes. That's when I think that you would reach a point where they're gonna get together and say, hey, we're going to cut the cord on this. We're not going to give him another chance in 2025. We're not going to give him the ability to try and hire a third offensive coordinator to try and right the ship. That's going to be something that they, seriously take a look at if Oklahoma just simply gets their ass kicked these next 2 weeks, which is highly possible given the two opponents that are remaining. But Adam, I want to ask you here, because obviously when you talk about Brent Venables' future, when you look at the type of leader, the type of coach, the type of man that he is, there's not a soul out there wearing crimson and cream that doesn't want this to work out for Brent Venables. I think that that's probably a pretty safe assumption based on the type of coach, who Brent is as a person, the way he conducts himself, how he's an incredible ambassador for the University of Oklahoma and the football program. If I had a son, I would want him to play for Brent Venables and be mentored by BV. But sadly, this is a business that is predicated on wins and losses, and no amount of high character or respectability can overcome not being able to win football games on Saturdays. So we need to look at what Brent has done in almost 3 years of football, and I think that you've got to weigh the positives and negatives here. And I kind of want to start with the positives here. I got a few that you can push back on me a little bit. I've got 3 positives here. He was hired to bring back defense at the University of Oklahoma. In 3 years, I think he's done that to an extent. Is it an elite defense? No. Is it a really good defense? Yes. I think if our offense had any type of pulse whatsoever and didn't consistently put the defense in shitty situations, statistically, I think that Oklahoma probably has a top 10 defense in college football. But what Brent Venables and Zach Alley have done, great hire, by the way, that's another feather in Brent's cap, bringing in Zach Alley from Jacksonville State. What those 2 guys have done to Oklahoma's defense in 3 years, I'm not sure how you could sit back and not be happy with the progress that's been made, knowing that this is still a far from finished product.
Yeah. Hello to Randy in the chat there. I love seeing regulars with us live on YouTube. Appreciate that. As far as, Brent, yeah, he's batting about 500 on coordinator hires. Ted Roof, not a good hire in my opinion. Zach Alley, great hire. Jeff Lebby, I think was a great hire. And we talked about that last offseason when Jeff Lebby was going off to Mississippi State. We talked about, hey, his offense was actually way better than most people gave him credit for. It was top 10, but it wasn't number 1. And that pissed OU fans off for the most part. And it was frustrating. And I said at the time, I think we wanted, at least in my mind, I wanted OU to leave on better terms with Jeff Lebby than what we were leaving that with, because you want your coaching tree to be there. Because if he goes off to Mississippi State and they make the playoffs in 2 years, you want to be able to pick up that phone and say, hey, Jeff Lebby, come home to Norman. I think that door is kind of closed right now. And that's frustrating because, he did some good things at Oklahoma. I know there was the whole Art Briles stuff, notwithstanding there, but yes, yeah, I mean, he's 2 of 2 on, or 2 of 4 on hires right now. Two bad hires, 2 pretty bad hires on his coordinator positions, 2 good hires on the coordinator positions. And I think when you look at Brent Venables, you can say, yeah, he is one offensive coordinator, good offensive coordinator hire from, really riding the ship. But you can also say, why would you let that same guy hire more coordinators? Because he's already proven 50% of the time he hires the wrong guy. And with offensive coordinators, if they're already good, he's going to have to make that hire again. So, like, I don't know. Do we keep letting the same guy make the same mistakes? And I know that's going to be another question we'll ask later in the show with Joe Castiglione. But at a certain point, like, when do we say, hey, like, this isn't going to continue to get any better?
Yeah, and I think you look at the recruiting over the last, 3 years, obviously with National Signing Day being just a few weeks away, we'll see if Oklahoma's able to hold on to this, especially the two premier offensive tackles that they've got, which is going to pay dividends for them down the line, especially going to 2025, where you've got to figure out a way to right the ship on the offensive side of the football and try and figure out a way to consistently score some points. But I do want to point out another hire that Brent made that, at least outside of the inability to consistently catch punts, I think that you got to give props to BV for hiring Doug Deacon to come in and kind of get that third phase of the game right for the Sooners. And again, I do think that you make a really good point, Adam. I think that the negatives that we're about to go through here, I think that they do kind of outweigh the pros. Obviously, we've talked about it. He blew the offensive coordinator hire after Jeff Lebby went to Mississippi State. Even though we hated the decision on this podcast to promote Seth Luttrell and Joe John Finley, we understood why he did it, to keep the recruiting class intact, make it an easier transition with the current roster. And kind of ironically, it helped keep Jackson Arnold and Norman. And, he also made the decision to go with two inexperienced quarterbacks into the first year of the SEC without having a quarterback coach on the roster. It wasn't until after the South Carolina game that they finally elevated Kevin Johns due to Seth Luttrell being fired. And so you've got to put that blame on the head coach. And that falls significantly, that falls on Brent Venables' shoulders, because he's the head football coach. He signs off on all of this. He's the one that ultimately has to answer for some of these decisions. But we're almost 3 full seasons into the Brent Venables era. And time after time, Adam, and you've been the biggest, proponent. You've been the biggest, advocate of talking about this position, for the last 3 seasons, ever since Brent Venables has got back to Norman. We're still running into the same game management mistakes that cost this football team yards and points on a week in and week out basis. And, getting the delay of game penalty after the 43-yard fake field goal or fake punt. We were so excited that play actually worked that we kind of let our guard down a little bit, and we went from having 1st and 10 first and goal on the 10-yard line, where we get a 5-yard delay game penalty followed by 2 straight back-to-back sacks that set us up for a long field goal. God bless Zach Schmidt for doing his job. But we could go on and on, but that lack of game management and lack of clock management, the lack of awareness, that still continues to be a problem for Brent in year 3 here.
I will go back again and again to Bedlam 2023 when Oklahoma lost that game. In the press conference afterwards, there was a penalty during the game. It was a sideline interference. One of the coaches, I don't know if it was Brent himself or whoever it was, but that was like the 3rd time the sideline had gotten a penalty that season. And there were opportunities after that penalty for Oklahoma to win the game, so on and so forth. But just those types of things, it's like those are within your control. Those are within your control to eliminate. And Brent said, hey, the margin of error is not big enough for the coaches to be making mistakes like that. And that's still the case. And we're still seeing mistakes from the coaches. Now, I will give Brent credit in the first half against Missouri. I think the timeouts and the way he handled the end of that first half were perfect. I loved what he did there. Excellent. We haven't seen enough of that. I thought the way he handled the end of the 4th quarter, and I texted you before that drive and I said, hey, I'm not letting Jackson Arnold throw the ball there. I thought probably the appropriate move was to run Xavier Robinson maybe once or twice, see if you can get 15, 20 yards doing that. And then you let Jackson Arnold make a throw or two to maybe get you in a long field goal range situation. But I just felt way better about Oklahoma's ability to win that game in overtime rather than have Jackson Arnold drive, 50 yards in 30 seconds. I didn't think that was a realistic position to put him in. And it proved true. I'm not saying I'm right about everything, but I just feel like his feel for the game. And this is his mistake. He had at least a lot better situation with Jeff Lebby where he could say, okay, I'm going to turn my back completely on what's going on offensively, work on the defense. And now I feel like he's still trying to do that. And it's like, dude, you've got Zach Alley. Rely on that guy. Look at what the offense is doing. And he hadn't done that all season. It was a lazy hire with Seth Luttrell. It should have been good enough. I think it could have been good enough if Brent had just looked at it and said, hey, that's stupid. Stop doing that. Throughout the entire season. And he's still not looking at the offense. And I'll tell you how I know that. It's because Joe John Finley called a jet sweep to the tight end I mean, this is ridiculous. If Brent is just aware of what the offense is doing, he should say, Joe John, like, don't even waste the 20 minutes installing that play in practice. Like, he's just totally oblivious to what's going on the offensive side of the ball. So if he hires the right offensive coordinator that can handle things and not need babysitting, like, fine, then things will probably work out, at least for next year and maybe 2 years, 3 years down the road. But that's almost like the offensive coordinator in that situation is babysitting Brent, because Brent doesn't have to turn around and, take responsibility for what the offense is doing.
I think that there is a huge gap with the way that the defensive side of the football is managed from a coaching standpoint, whether that's schematics, whether that's development, whether that's, overall, personnel decisions on who they, choose to rotate and get some of these snaps. Brent being a defensive guy, yes, that kind of makes sense, but you're the head football coach. You have to be as, as detail oriented on the defensive side of the football as you are on offense. And it is clear as night and day that the same level of attention has not been put on the offensive side of the football this year. And, maybe that goes back to Brent's inexperience, where the fact that he was able to bring Jeff Lebby in for, the first 2 seasons, where he was essentially just able to say, okay, Jeff, the defense has been so effing bad at Oklahoma for the better part of the last decade. I'm going to spend most of my time trying to, work with Ted Roof, work with, Bates, Chavis, all these assistants. We're going to do anything and everything that we can to try and get this defense fixed as fast as possible. You take the offense over to the other practice field here and, you run the show over there. We'll figure it out. I'll see you on Saturdays. But I think that that's something that has finally caught up to Brent, because, like I said, they absolutely butchered it on bringing in Seth Terrell and Joe John Finley, getting them to call plays and, put their fingerprints on this offense. And again, I do want to say it's not Brent Venables' fault that Jackson Arnold fumbles the ball twice. It's not Brent Venables' fault that Peyton Bowen, has an inability to consistently catch punts, different things like that. But the thing that kind of pisses me off, and we've seen this time and time again over the last couple of seasons, and I'm gonna pinpoint one specific guy on this coaching staff, because again, he falls under the umbrella that is Brent Venables. I don't know why Brent hasn't tried to make a more concerted effort to, basically, if the fan base can see this, I know that Brent Venables and the coaching staff can see this. And I'm gonna start with DeMarco Murray. Adam, we've seen it time and time again, where we don't understand the running back rotation. We don't understand why certain guys are getting more carries over others. Whether it's Sawchuk, whether it was Kennedy Brooks, Javonte Barnes, and I'm going to use Xavier Robinson as just the latest example. I don't know anybody that would have watched that Missouri game the other night after, looking at the makeshift offensive line that Oklahoma trotted out, the 9th different starting 5 in a game this season. Is there any debate that Xavier Robinson, in the limited amount of carries that he had in Missouri, that really being one of the only times that we've seen him tote the rock consistently, any debate on whether or not he's arguably the top running back on this football team, maybe 1A, 1B behind Javonte Barnes? How, as a coaching staff, and again, maybe he doesn't know what he's doing, maybe he's not a good practice player, but what Xavier Robinson put on tape on Saturday night against Missouri, how does that guy not get more run? Who's managing these personnel decisions and making the decision that this guy is going to get snaps over one person? We saw the same thing with Gavin Sawchuk towards the end of his freshman year. Why are we continuing to see this position group continue to get mismanaged? And I guess to throw that back to you, Sam Franklin. Why in the hell is Sam Franklin all year long, other than the fact that he's 5 years older, why has he been getting more playing time than Xavier Robinson?
I know what DeMarco would say. It's pass protection is what it boils down to.
Your offensive line can't pass protect at all. If he's your best guy running the football, I don't know what the game plan was against Missouri.
Well, it's a total lack of self-awareness. Like you mentioned, like, we don't know who our best players are. We're not playing them all the time. I don't think we know what our identity is, because you look at other teams that are limited offensively, especially limited at quarterback, Michigan being example, 1A of, they really can't do anything offensively. They have a good defense. They can't do anything offensively. How do they keep every game within one possession? They basically just grind it out on offense. They run 3 yards in a cloud of dust. If they don't make it, they punt, they play field position. They don't put their offense in a position where they're going to make mistakes that the defense can't overcome. And we go out there and we're running hurry up with, routes that are all under 10 yards. It's like, what are we doing? Like, we just have no self-awareness for what we are as a team and as an offense, and we're not putting a cohesive unit together. And again, it's a disconnect. Brent doesn't seem to know what the offensive plan is going into a game, coming out of a game. And we saw this after the Texas game where we lost 34-3. And he's talking all about in the press conference about how the defense didn't play good enough. It's like, dude, are you even like paying attention when the offense is on the field? And I've started to watch him a lot more, especially when I'm at the games in person. I know he's toting around the iPad. I don't know what he's looking at on the iPad. I noticed against Maine, there was times where the referees were chasing him down to say, hey, do you want to accept or decline a penalty? And he's chewing out, Deshaun McCullough on the sideline. That's like, dude, like you have a coach for that now. You have other analysts that can do that.
Yeah.
Like you've got to be more of a CEO and be totally present in the total game situation and management of your entire team and program. I just feel like it's not there, which kind of brings me to the bigger question, which we talked about already. Like most likely Brent will come back. That's the most realistic situation that we know of right now. But the bigger question is like, should he? And I know I've been rambling for a minute, but I kind of wanted to get to like I feel like Oklahoma is in a position where we will be by far the best job available this offseason because there's not a lot of turmoil in many other blue bloods or power programs right now. And I kind of feel like it's almost irresponsible for Oklahoma not to say, hey, let's put ourselves first in line and get the best available guy out there.
Brent Venables is currently 21-15, on the verge of going 5-7 this season, 1-7 in the SEC. If Auburn doesn't shit down their leg in the fourth quarter and hand Oklahoma the game, the Sooners are going to be 0-8 in the first year of the SEC conference play. If not for a muffed punt and a favorable call by the decision booth, we probably lose that game to Houston. Oklahoma is on the verge of missing a bowl game for the first time in 25 years. We are the laughingstock of the SEC conference. And honestly, if it weren't for the debacle that's going on down in Tallahassee, Florida, we might be the laughingstock of college football with how bad we are offensively and how the season has played out. I know the vote of confidence was just issued and everyone expects Brent to be back in 2025, but I do still think that there is a chance, depending on how these last 2 weeks go, to where, if Alabama and LSU, if they blow Oklahoma out of the water, if it's a 25, 30-point deficit in both of these matchups, depending on how the team looks and how they play for Brent, I think that there is still a slight chance that Brent, is not returning in 2025. Now, you pose the question, does Brent deserve to come back in 2025? And honestly, I can see it both ways. Do you make the decision right now, 2 to 3 weeks before signing day? Okay. It's clear Brent's not the guy. 2 out of his first 3 years, losing seasons. Do we cut ties with him now, blow the whole thing up, and instead of thinking that we just need to go out there and hire a new offensive coordinator, maybe we just start from scratch and go in and try and find the next the next up and comer, the next best hire to come in and be the head football coach at Oklahoma. I don't know if that's the case. Me personally, with where I'm at right now, with 2 weeks left to play, I think that you do have to give Brent one more year, but I get where people are coming from when they make the argument, is it worth giving Brent Venables one more year, knowing that if it doesn't play out, and there's been no indication from what we've seen in the first 3 years that he can turn this around going into year 4. Do you go ahead and give him an extra year to try and get this to basically bet all of his chips on an offensive coordinator to come in and save his job? Or do you just simply say, okay, like we're going to be going through a rebuild. This is going to be a sticky, tough situation for the next, 4 to 5 years. Do we just go ahead and cut ties with him now and try and go in and bring in the next guy? I can see it both ways. If I'm making a decision, I probably give Brent one more year. But what I would turn around if I'm Joe Castiglione, if I'm President Harris, I turn around to all these big money donors that are sitting here, putting together a collection fund, trying to figure out, okay, can we put $44.8 million on a check? My turnaround would be, why don't you guys take 20, 25, $30 million of that, go out there, pay $2 million for a new offensive coordinator, and then spend another $10 to $15 million in the transfer portal and in the NIL class for 2026. I can see it both ways.
But I mean, the players are not the issue necessarily. I think there's enough talent there. The offensive line obviously needs to be better, but I think that's a development issue. I don't think you can just go out and, we have $10 million to spend on the offensive line. Look at all these incredible All-American offensive linemen in the portal. Those don't exist. So I don't think that you can just pump money into that and solve that problem overnight. I think, and I also
Texas did it.
Texas doesn't start offensive linemen from the portal, do they? I don't think they do. They have a lot of receivers. They have a defensive end.
They revamped the defensive side of the football and the offensive line. They did a tremendous job, which that was the pancake factory. I want to say that all 5 of their starting offensive linemen right now were high school guys that they've developed.
There you go.
That's the route that you want to take. That's what Bill Beanbo needs to do. But Bill's in a sticky situation right now to where he's whiffed on the last 2 high school recruiting classes, and now you're in a situation where you've got 5-6 offensive linemen that are either done for the year or constantly banged up. And now you're having to sit out there and play 2, essentially true freshmen on the left side of the offensive line. And you're playing, a guy in Spencer Brown that shouldn't even be within 100 miles of the locker room in Oklahoma.
I was just thinking whether Stillwater was within 100 miles of Norman, because maybe
they can't win either. So
no, they can't win either. But here's the thing, though. Pumping all that money into NIL instead of buying out Brent's contract, I don't think that's an option. I don't think NIL is going to suddenly turn things around. I think offensive coaching is going to turn something around. And, people have their guys, Mike Shanahan, Joe Craddock from Indiana and Tulane respectively. You could also go get those head coaches as well. Joe Craddock, if Oklahoma picks up the phone, he says, he didn't even ask how much is the salary. He says, when you want me to be there, because he knows it's going to be significantly more than Tulane. Kurt Cignetti at Indiana, maybe he's a guy that, you don't like, you do like.
I don't know.
Either side of the fence, whatever. I don't know. But he's a guy that, who else is going to get him? Auburn might be open this year. That's about it. That's your only competition. If you're an Oklahoma, job opening, you're going to get almost anybody that you want. Unless those guys re-sign at where they are. Maybe he does in Indiana. Maybe he says, hey, I'm already in the playoffs. Why go to Oklahoma? And if that's the case, we have a very dire outlook for Oklahoma going forward, because so many other teams are going to be in the playoffs. It's going to be hard to get our next guy. But I'm on board with hey, let's try to give Brent another chance. But most of the fan base is checked out. I don't know how they check back in. And I don't know how, a coach really pulls himself off the mat at this point, because we just don't have a track record of that happening almost ever. The closest would be Jim Harbaugh, who had 10-win seasons repeatedly at Michigan before kind of dipping in that 2020 year, had a losing record. Things looked terrible. He kind of restructured his contract for a lower buyout. And then, they had scandal, but they ended up winning a national championship and going on a huge run to end his tenure there. But that is the exception to the rule. Most guys are getting fired, either this year or the following year in these types of situations.
And Kirby Smart didn't win his first national championship until year 7.
That is not the same. There's nowhere close to where Brent is. Brent has 2 losing seasons in his first 3 at Oklahoma.
I'm just talking about the fact that it's not necessarily always a guarantee that a coach is going to step into a program like Georgia or Michigan or Oklahoma and expect that it's just going to click. Now, I do think that your
totally different.
Absolutely, and that's what I was just about to say. The trends that were at Michigan when Harbaugh first got there, the trends in the first couple of seasons for Kirby Smart, it's night and day different than what the current status of Oklahoma is. But I guess my question back to you is, do you think, say Brent Venables pulls a Bob Stoops and pulls a rabbit out of his hat, brings in a guy, whether it's Ben Arbuckle, Craddock at Tulane, Willie Korn from Liberty, do you think that if Brent Venables is able to go out there and pluck an offensive coordinator to come in, you're going to have to go get a quarterback from the transfer portal? I don't think Jackson Arnold is the answer. I think that he's got a tremendous amount of talent, but I think that he's going to have to go revive his career somewhere else. But if you're Brent Venables, do you think that is? Do you think that that's simply all that you can do? And for you, Adam, as a fan and somebody that covers and watches this team like nobody else, do you think that is something Joe Castiglione should give Brent the opportunity to do in 2025? Or are you in the camp right now to where you say, I've seen enough, my opinion's made up, this isn't going to get any better no matter how much more time you give him, get rid of him now?
It's a tough question to answer, because in some ways it's like, I think back to Frank Beamer and how he didn't have very many winning seasons until year 6 of his time at Virginia Tech. And then it just exploded from there, and how much that could have happened in many situations across the country, but fan bases just didn't give a coach enough time. And maybe we're heading that direction with Brent, and maybe he's just a couple years with an offensive coordinator from getting there potentially, because he's done some other good things. But I've seen so much that tells me he's just not managing the program right now. He's a lot of people talked about time management and just focus and making sure that he's got his attention in the areas it needs to be, and not just on defense and not just on this area, and not spending too much time on this or media or whatever. I don't know. So it makes me wonder of do we just need to like cut ties like now and not continue to go down this path? Because unless we're winning 8-9 games next year, which I think is a pathetic season for Oklahoma football, but it would be a step in the right direction and probably enough confidence to continue to roll with Brent into a year 5. I just don't have a ton of confidence that that's going to happen. So like, I don't think that a rebuild is guaranteed if we cut ties with Brent either. There's a lot of talent on this team. Some of it will go in the portal. Some new talent will come in. Guys like John Summerall, guys like Kurt Signetti, probably the top 2 names as head coach potentials, in the market right now. Those guys are winning 10 games, 11 games in their first year at their schools that they've been at in the past. So that's not a guarantee that we're going for a rebuild at that point.
Do you think it's fair to say that if you fire Brent Venables at the end of this year, you run the risk of setting the program even further back than what it currently is? Because if you do, you're losing probably 40 to 50% of your roster. All those defensive blue chip guys that Brent's brought in over the last couple of seasons, a lot of them are going to choose to go play elsewhere. And then you're in the same situation that you're in right now from an offensive standpoint.
But like we're 5-7, Tyler. I mean, that's our best case scenario at this point, is going 5-7.
We're headed.
That's where we're headed. I mean, if we lose 40-50% of the roster, like, so be it. I don't think that's necessarily going to be true, but every school around is doing that. We can't let Brent Venables hold us hostage if we're determined that he's not the guy that's going to lead us to where we need to go. And that's up to Joe Castiglione. That's up to Joe Harris, big money donors, et cetera, to make that call and that decision, which is a very difficult decision to make, I'm sure. But if you lose a big chunk of your roster and you hire someone from another school that does have a lot of talent, those guys are going to come in. Other guys are going to come in. Maybe some guys that normally would transfer could get really excited that, hey, John Summerall, the defensive, mastermind from Tulane, from Troy before that, maybe he's a guy worth sticking around for. I like being at Oklahoma. I don't want to move. There could be scenarios there as well. But yeah, you can't just say, hey, like, I can't be held hostage because of, the roster might transfer, or, the recruiting class might drop. Like, you have to move forward at some point. And there's plenty of coaches out there that are having success in year 1 in big ways.
If you make the decision, if Brent Venables does in fact come back for 2025, there needs to be a concerted effort made by the One Oklahoma, the NIL collective, the big money donors, that they need to essentially be able to go to Brent Venables and say, okay, here's a blank check. Go out there, get the best offensive coordinator, the best offensive mind that you can possibly get. If you've got to let a couple of assistants go, whether it's the tight end coach, he's gone, running back coach, okay, I can take it either way. I'm probably leaning towards the side of he needs to move on to in Oklahoma. Really, Emmett Jones and Bill Beanbo, I think, are the only 2 people that should probably be coming back on the offensive side of the football. But I think that you can make a fair assumption, Adam, that the same level of emphasis in the NIL space that has been put on the defensive side of the football, particularly the defensive line, Dominic Williams, David Stone, Jaden Jackson, all the money that has been spent and all the effort that's been put in to try and beef up that front 7, the Oklahoma defensive line, that's paid dividends. Oklahoma's got one of the best front 7s in the SEC, one of the best rushing defenses in all of college football. I think that it is fair to say that as much attention has been put on the defensive line, I think that there's been a lot of neglect that's been put in terms of the same level of commitment to Bill and on that side of the football. And that's kind of one of the passes that I do give to Bill Beanbo, because if you look at all of all of the scouts, all of the recruiting analysts, even people in the NFL, Bill Beanbo is by far one of the top 1 or 2 offensive line coaches in college football. And I know that his position group has been, plagued by the injury bug, but Bill Beanbo just didn't all of a sudden, forget how to coach offensive linemen. So I think that if you're going to put a ton of money, effort, and focus into the defensive line, I think that that's got to be reciprocated. It seems like that's the direction that it's going with this current recruiting class, with some of the guys that they currently have committed. We'll see if they can hang on to them. But I'm going to give Bill a little bit of a pass, because I think that whether it was his inability to want to adapt to the way that NIL was moving into college football, I think that you do have to give Bill a little bit of a pass on that, because there, at least from where I'm sitting, there has not been as much attention and emphasis on the offensive line as there has been the defensive line. And I think that's solely because they have so much confidence and faith in Bill Beanbo and his track record. They thought that, okay, Bill can take all these guys, these 3-star, these lower 4-star guys, and we'll be able to make this work. That did work in the Big 12. You look at some of the guys, you look at every single time that we take the field in the SEC, you're going up against NFL defensive linemen. They've got to get that addressed.
Let's kind of wrap up this conversation and get to our best bets. But let's talk about Joe Castiglione here, because I think this is kind of the fly in the ointment situation in some, and maybe in my mind, maybe in big money donor minds, because this was not a situation Oklahoma expected themselves to be in. We didn't think we'd be here at the end of year 3 after Brent Venables wins 10 games in 2023. We didn't think we'd be in a situation where, okay, Brent Venables' job is on the line. Should we fire him? Should we find a new guy? Should we keep him? And Joe Castiglione is the athletic director. It's not very common that athletic directors are going to be able to make multiple hires, multiple failed hires, as a football head coach or in other big areas around the university in the athletic department, and continue to keep their job and continue to make those hires. Same reason that we talked about, maybe one reason you don't keep Brent around is because he's failed in hiring 2 coordinators so far, 50% of the time. When you look at Joe Castiglione, I think everyone kind of thought, okay, there's going to be a moment where he's going to retire, right off into the sunset. We'll all thank him for everything they did, even if we slightly disagreed with some aspects of the way he's run the department. Now, where we are right now, Brent Venables, if we're wanting to fire him, that's a blemish on Joe Castiglione's record. Porter Moser, as of right now, is a blemish on Joe Castiglione's record. Women's basketball looks great. Softball looks great, although he didn't hire Patty Gasso. Baseball looks great with Skip Johnson. The reason Skip Johnson is the coach is because Brent Venables has a blemish before that with Pete Hughes, one of the worst hires in Oklahoma athletics history, in my opinion. And then you look across the board of the funding and the facilities and the development, it's lacking. The Lloyd Noble Center still exists. We're trying to do this funky, off-campus basketball arena that probably won't go through. Baseball renovations not getting done. Softball finally got done with a lot of help from Loves. Their football needs renovations. There's a lot of things going on there with athletics, and you have to wonder, okay, are you going to let Joe Castiglione hire the next head football coach? And if we're getting to a point where we're like, we can't allow that, I think you have to have Brent come back for another year and say, hey, Joe, after softball season's over, baseball wins the World Series in June, which, I'm being optimistic there, but hey, you're retiring. You're announcing your retirement ahead of time. We're going to get ahead of this so that when we get through the 2025 season, we have the opportunity, if we do want to part ways with Brent at that time, we have a new athletic director that will make that hire. I feel like that's kind of the fly in the ointment situation.
So am I sitting here listening to you say that Joe Castiglione needs to be on the way out?
I just think it's unusual for an athletic director to be able to make multiple head coaching hires, especially for football, and be able to make so many decisions.
He's only had to make 3, and really just 2. I mean, Lincoln Riley was handed the keys by Bob Stoops. That was his endorsement.
Yeah, and I'm not talking about like, Bob Stoops or Lincoln Riley or anything like that. I'm talking about Brent Venables, Porter Moser, the facilities and fundraising. Like, there's 4 big areas that are really lacking right now.
I think that it has become apparent, and as we continue, to get our feet wet, as members of the Southeastern Conference, we're going through it right now with football. We're going to see it with basketball. We're going to see it with softball and baseball. I am in agreement with you that Oklahoma is severely lacking behind almost every single one of these other schools in the Southeastern Conference when it comes to fundraising, when it comes to facilities, when it comes to, overall game day atmosphere across a multitude of different sports. Maybe outside of softball takes the cake over everybody in the United States. But I could try to maybe get behind you on that sense, but I don't think that just simply because we could have possibly made the wrong hire as the head football coach, Joe's 3rd football head coaching hire in the last 26 years. I don't think that that's necessarily cause for having the conversation. Okay, Joe Castiglione, it might be time for you to consider retirement. I think that Joe has done way too much. There's too many. There's dozens of national championships across all different sports at Oklahoma that have been won in the last 25 years. I think that that's a little bit of unfair for people to simply say because Brent Venables has done has severely underperformed in what's going to be his 3rd year at Oklahoma, that's cause for let's bring Joe Castiglione's contract or his current status with the university up. I think that that's a little bit unfair.
I mean, there's definitely an argument you can make that Lincoln left because he wasn't getting the resources and things he needed. And a lot of that came into place when Brent came around, and it took Lincoln leaving for that to happen. I mean, I think a lot of people would argue that.
And that's where I think it's going to take a 5-7 type year where Oklahoma is the laughing stock of college football outside of the Florida State Seminoles, to where I think that Joe is, there has to be a fire that gets lit under the president and under the athletic directors, as to where, this is Oklahoma. This is a blue blood program. It's absolutely indefensible for Oklahoma to be in the situation that they're in right now as a football program. So again, maybe that just kind of ties into the argument that, yes, we just need to simply break it and get Brent out of here. But I can see it both ways. Either way, you're not in a good position going into 2025.
Yeah, I agree with you. Like, I think I could see it both ways too. I'm just like, I don't know. I'm frustrated by everything.
Well, let's pinpoint it. Let's pinpoint it down here, and then we'll get to our best bets. Should Brent Venables return in 2025?
I've seen so many mistakes happen repeatedly that I feel like no. I mean, I would be okay with giving him another shot, but I'm not holding my breath, feeling that it's going to change much in 2025. And I feel like most fans are checked out. Like, I'm going to continue to go to the games. I'm going to continue to watch everything. It's a lifestyle. It's not a choice. It's not like entertainment for me, but I feel like everybody's checked out, and I don't feel like it's going to be able to turn around. And if Oklahoma's going to be the first in line for any available coach as the best job available this offseason, I kind of feel like you need to take that route. And I don't take pleasure in that at all.
I agree with you, but unfortunately, I think he is going to be back in 2025, and all of his eggs are going to be in the basket of hiring an offensive coordinator to come in there and save his job. So we'll see. But Adam, let's get to best bets here.
Best bets. You've been right about a lot of things with your record here going up. Still, we both went 3-2. So same record, 3 games apart here.
Profitable.
Not making much ground here. And I only have a few weeks left that I need to gain that ground on you. So Tyler, you'll go first again with your best bets.
Going into the SEC here, going down to the state of Florida, LSU going on the road to take on the Gators. LSU is the favorite in this matchup. I believe it's -4.5 Tigers. Florida coming off of an embarrassing defeat where they were just simply outmatched on the road in Austin. I think that they're going to be coming back. DJ Lagway I don't believe he's going to be set to play. They're going to give him another weeks of rest. Either way, if he does play, I think LSU coming off of an embarrassing performance loss at home to Alabama. I think that they go on the road. They respond in a big way. I'm going to take LSU to jump on them early. Just because I think that Florida, maybe they figure out a way to sneak it in, backdoor cover, but I like LSU -3.5 first half cover.
I had that as -4.5 on our list, so I'll have to change that on the graphic.
Well, I took 3.5 first half.
Okay, -3.5 first half. I've got Liberty -14.5 going to UMass here. UMass starting quarterback out for the rest of the year, so Flames will face a backup quarterback. I think the running game and the nature of UMass being a bottom 30 rush defense, I think Liberty will be able to take this one pretty handily.
I like it. Going out to Big 12, Kansas going on the road up to Provo to take on BYU. Cougars currently a 2.5-point favorite. This one kind of scares me a little bit. Obviously, BYU coming off of the emotional win over arch rival Utah last week, game-winning field goal. And Kansas has looked pretty good the last couple of weeks, obviously coming off of a blowout win over the Cyclones of Iowa State. I'm not going to overthink this one. I think that BYU is the better overall football team here. I think that the fact that this game is going to be played at home, that gives the Cougars an advantage. Give me BYU -2.5.
I like that one. Feels like a trap, just like I had last week when I picked Iowa State -2.5 against Kansas. So we'll see what happens there. My number 2, I'm going back to the troops here. I took a week off from supporting them. Well, at least not as far as picking them. I'm back. I need their support again. Tulane at Navy over 52.5 here. And maybe Oklahoma's next offensive coordinator.
Ooh, could be something there, Adam. I'm going over to the state of South Carolina. Gamecocks hosting the Missouri Tigers. Brady Cook again expected not to play this week when Missouri goes on the road. South Carolina, a 12.5-point favorite here. I like South Carolina big. I don't know how Missouri scores in this one. Lenore Stellars, Rocket Sanders, they're going to be running all day on that Missouri defense. Give me South Carolina -12.5.
Should be pretty easy for a competent team to do that against Missouri. My number 3, I've got James Madison traveling on the road to Old Dominion. I'm taking the Dukes here -2.5. Kind of a little bit of a rivalry game there in the Sun Belt. Both solid squads, but I think the Dukes just have better players.
I just want to point out that, Adam, we've been doing this podcast on 5 years now. I think that this is the saltiest I've ever seen you, the most upset and clear frustration that
We
you've
have
been.
5 wins,
this
Tyler.
this has nothing to do with Adam's optimism regarding the baseball program. This is DEFCON 5 with the OU football program, and Adam is just simply he's given up. He's given up. Let's burn the whole thing down.
You know what it is? On Sunday, I was in 3 different airports, and I saw shirts by pretty much every college. I saw something called Dillard University, and I'm like, they have a better football program than we do right now. So yes, I am a little salty.
All right, pick number 4. From one bad Oklahoma head coach to another former Oklahoma head coach, I'm going Nebraska at USC. Trojans currently an 8.5-point favorite at home. USC made a quarterback change. Miller Moss is out. In steps the transfer from UNLV. USC coming off of a bye. Nebraska, wheels have fallen off for Matt Rule. I think the USC figures out a way to just simply score enough points. Dylan Raiola, he's going to struggle. Give me USC minus 8.5.
I'm going the other way on that same game. Nebraska plus 8.5 here. I know they have a new offensive coordinator with Dana Holgerson. I know they're traveling on the road.
Interesting,
I know they've got a freshman quarterback. This is an interesting game. Both teams probably desperate to try to get into that bowl eligibility realm there, but I feel like Nebraska just wants it more. Like I think their culture is better. I think USC, maybe players are quitting. I don't know if necessarily I'd say that. Maybe the new quarterback is somebody that the team rallies behind, but there's probably a reason that Miller Moss was playing the majority of the games. So I know Lincoln Riley, one thing he does well is he coaches quarterbacks well. And if he thought Miller Moss was the guy, I don't know, that tells me something a little bit. I think that maybe this other guy will struggle a little bit here and there. So also it's fun to root against Lincoln Riley. So why not pick the Cornhuskers plus 8.5 here?
I'm going to be cheering for Nebraska deep down. If Nebraska is going to spoil this for me, I hope it's a Nebraska money line. I hope they win the game outright. So Adam, rounding this thing out for me, pick number 5. This one feels so easy that it actually scares me the most out of my 5 picks. Texas going to Arkansas. Longhorns a 13.5-point favorite over the Razorbacks. Arkansas is not a very good football team. They're banged up. Texas, they've got a lot to play for, obviously, with a couple teams losing over this past weekend, Georgia most notably. Texas controls their path to Atlanta into a top 4 seed in the college football playoff. So I think that Texas goes on the road. They avoid the look ahead here in a couple of weeks against Texas A&M. I think that they go on the road to Fayetteville. Texas blows out Arkansas. Give me the Horns minus 13.5.
That does feel easy. My number 3, I'm going with the game where there is some injury potential differences going on here. Tennessee at Georgia. There's some rumors that Nico might not play. I know the Bear from Fox has reported that. I think that guy is kind of one of the weirdest media members out there, so I will take that with a major grain of salt. But whether Nico plays or not, I'm just going to take the under here on 47.5. I think these are 2 incredible defenses. I think they're going to try to run the ball, both of them, and not have a lot of success. And I don't really trust either quarterback here. So I don't think there's going to be a whole lot of points down there in Athens. I think Georgia probably ends up winning, but I will take the under on that game. So that's going to be a wrap for us this evening.
We can't lose Saturday. Oklahoma cannot lose a football game this weekend. Enjoy the bye week because it's going to get pretty bad pretty quick here in 2 weeks.
Yeah. We'll have some stuff to talk about heading into Alabama and LSU, whether it's good, bad, it'll be ugly. But we will see everyone then. We appreciate everyone for making us a part of your weekly routine. And we'll be back next week for the next episode of The Main Line.